All right, I'm live. Hey, I figured out. Anyways, yeah, I'm a little late. It's 4 minutes past. I don't know why I couldn't figure out how to go live on it tonight. Anyways, there's my pal Zoe. She's in the background tonight. I just had of course, when you want to go live too, my friend just called me, and then a package showed up with, before I start reading tonight, my the Kevin Weeks book that I've been reading. I had two people on and now they bailed, but there's another one, but that's okay. Anyways, it'll be on replay if anybody wants to watch it. But I just got a new book in the mail. Not that I'm some big learned guy either. I just want to read. And I thought, like, I found like my last couple movies I did were pretty epic, I thought, but I don't really want to just put up day by day kind of crap, going hiking because I don't think people really watch it. But my video, Pacific Run 2022, and my other video, uh, Remembrance Day 2022, plus the Halloween one was pretty good. I might make a video this Friday. We're having a Halloween party at the clubhouse Friday night. Not Halloween. We're having a Christmas get together Friday night at the clubhouse. Deep fried turkey. So thanks for the likes, guys. The two people that did like it, that's great. Um, what I got in the mail just now is super cool, man. Joe Bonanno's book, Man of Honor. Super sweet. Like that's the autobiography of Joseph Bonanno, and it's kind of viewed as that he was like, he had to retire to Arizona, didn't he? I don't know. I'm not going to go quoting anything I don't know, but I'm going to be reading this book at some point. I thought maybe I'd like to do it on that. That's actually what kind of inspired me initially was I thought about reading this book online, and then I thought, I'm not doing a lot right now, just at home, and we're snowed in so much. I'm snowed in, me and the dogs, and that I thought I'd just start reading this Whitey Bulger story there of Kevin Weeks's. Before I started reading that too, there's another book that I kind of been reading that's a pretty cool one too. I would like to read a few words from, and it's a guy by this book's called Killer by Joey, and it's a story of like a mafia hitman. I don't know if you ever gone online. You've seen there is a video online out there that's like uh, him being interviewed about his jobs and whatnot, and autobiography of a hitman for the mafia by Joey with David Fisher, Playboy Press book. I thought I might read I'm going to do probably an hour today. I'll probably try and finish the first chapter of Kevin Weeks' book after, but don't be shy to chime in there, say good evening. So I was going to just read from this book called Killer. I was going to read the foreword, a few words of the foreword before I get into the other book and see if anybody's interested in this. It says, Joey is a businessman. Over the years, he has held various positions, from salesman to collecting agent and company troubleshooter. Generally, his organization has been satisfied with his work. Joey's business is crime. Two of the services he purveys are death and destruction, services that are high in demand in his industry. He is never begging for employment. I met Joey a number of years ago. At that time, he was on his way down the ladder. He turned into the one thing his employers did not like. He is a bettor, a strung out gambler, willing and eager to get down on any and everything: horses, basketball, football, cards, dice, even cockroaches. If it's a gamble, Joey is ready, hand in pocket. He will he will bet his lungs. Anyways, yeah, Joey, I saw an interview with this guy. I don't have the cover for that one, but yeah, well, he's a hitman for the mafia. Okay, so um, nobody really wants to chat or anything or have a smoke before I get into reading the book. I was saying to a friend, it's not easy to read online. Just reading aloud isn't that easy, and but I'm gonna give it a whirl again tonight. I want to read this, but I've been reading this book like for the last little while, but I thought I should just like read it all together. Okay, so I'm going to carry on page 10 of the book that brought you people here today or are going to watch this. It's called Brutal. That's just a jacket cover there. Brutal. The Untold Story of My Life Inside Whitey Bulger's Irish Mob. That's Kevin Weeks. He's like a tough guy, eh? And if you heard me read the story from last night, it was like basically like grew up in Southie and his dad's like pretty hard on the boys, and the girls even, and big family, and got to do good in school or you get beat up by your father, and the boys fought. And he was taught to box and whatnot, and that just carried on into the life, of the Irish mob. So I'm going to carry on page 10. And it was just after a discussion about how he'd just been in some big fight too and saved some kid. And it said he could hear my parents talking in the next room. Quote, "The little bastard has no fear," my father was saying to my mother. "I worry about him, Peg." The truth of the matter was I had been scared to death. My father wanted all of us kids to be able to take care of ourselves, but he meant with our hands. He wasn't big on weapons. If I hadn't had the pipe, I would have used my hands, but the outcome probably wouldn't have been so good for me. And I hadn't had the option to run like Richie did. I certainly hadn't wanted that scene to happen that night. I would have been happy to have walked home with no problems, eaten a peanut butter sandwich, and gone to bed. But since it happened, it was a good thing. The adrenaline had been flowing, and I was able to keep hitting the guy until he took off and left me. I was also lucky they were doing the fences over, and I'd been able to get a hold of that metal pipe. I hadn't been a hero that night. I had just used my natural instinct to survive. I'll just leave this part for a brief comment. Like, I'm a Canadian, and I don't know. We only have seen what we see in the movies, but this reminds me of streets of New York. Like it's and I've seen some of the neighborhoods and watched a lot of these documentaries from back in that day, and it's like pretty crazy. Like these beat up, like Fort Apache, the Bronx. Like some of those neighborhoods are just trashed, man. And it was like a war zone. Like it was a war zone. Hard to believe it's America. Okay, I'll carry on. Another night, my brother Johnny, who was 16 at the time, was also coming home from the boys' club when he saw a car parked on West 6th Street with its lights off. As Johnny walked by, he could see that the guy inside the car was exposing himself. Johnny opened the door and started punching him. Then he kicked in the headlights of the car. This was in the late 60s when there were weirdos all around. It seems like this stuff is more prevalent today, but maybe it's because people just didn't talk about it much when I was growing up. My father had certainly made sure that all three of us boys were able to use our hands to take care of ourselves in the ring as well as in the streets. He never turned us or trained us in boxing or put us through the paces like learning how to jump rope and hitting the heavy bag and speed bag. But at home, he made sure we had good wind and good footwork and knew the basics, like how to throw a jab, a straight right hand, and a left hook. The biggest thing he did for my boxing was to get me up at 6 in the morning to go for a run. His rule was simple: if you don't run, you don't box. So from age 12 up, from age 12 on, I woke up at 6 every morning, 365 days a year, regardless of the weather, and began the day with a 3 mile run, usually in the park near Old Colony. Then I would get ready for school. My brothers ran too. It was the best way to build up your wind. Billy, who was 8 years older than me, was the purest boxer of all of us, a completely natural boxer who won more than 108 fights. For each of his amateur fights, which he fought all over the country, he made about $25, which was enough to pay for his gas, tape wrap, and stuff that like that. Billy was so good, no one could even uh, touch him. He outclassed everyone. Billy was offered a $17,000 contract to go pro when he was 18, a huge amount of money in 1966, but he wanted to um, go to college that same year. Sugar Ray Robinson saw him fight in the New England tournament. Fighters came from all over New England to fight in that tournament, which was held in the old Boston Garden. Then you fought all your fights in one night and could end up fighting as many as 7 fights in one night if you kept on winning. Today, fighters fight one fight a week. After Billy won that tournament, Robinson went into the dressing room and spent 45 minutes talking to him about boxing. My father, my father and Billy's trainer, Johnny Woods, were there too. Robinson told Woods that Billy was the best amateur fighter he had ever seen. Billy also won that tournament the next 2 years, as well as the Golden Gloves Open Division in Lowell for 3 years. Two of these, 2 of those years, he was awarded the Outstanding Fighter Award in both those tournaments. Billy had the perfect temperament for boxing in the ring. He always he was always in control of himself and his emotions. My father was proud of Billy and rarely missed one of his fights. I went too, and also used to watch him spar at the local gyms like Baby Tiger's gym on Washington Street near Boston City Hospital, or the McDonough Gym in South Boston on East 4th Street, ironically right behind the South Boston District Court. A large number of good fighters came out of South Boston, but Billy was one of the best. That's pretty interesting, eh? Rough upbringing for these kids. So Johnny was a great boxer too, and won 29 amateur fights. But yeah, unlike Billy, he didn't have the disposition for boxing. He'd get mad in the ring, which was never good. Then he would lose his composure and try to hurt the other fighter. He would turn violent, like he was fighting in the street. I had a violent streak, but when I was boxing, I didn't forget the fundamentals of boxing. You just never got mad in the ring. I would never be the pure natural boxer that Billy was, but I won my fair share of matches. I have excellent hands, which is just part of my physical build. I also have big shoulders and big arms. I was considered the heaviest hitter of the three of us. Being able to punch hard was a big advantage in the ring. I was a, a boxer puncher. I could box, but I could also hit hard. I had good instincts and loved the sport. And I started early when I was 6, excuse me. I won the boys boxing championship, and at 7, the Southie Boston Baby Gloves Tournament. Baby Gloves was always held on St. Patrick's Day, and everyone in Southie would come to watch us fight 3 rounds. Before I was 16, I also won the silver mittens and fought in the Junior Olympics. And I always wanted to win. Out of my 78 fights, I only lost 2. One was to a kid from New Bedford. I took the fight on a week's notice and lost. But 3 weeks later, I fought him again and won. The second loss was at the Boston Club when I was 18 years old, fighting in the New England tournament. I made it to the finals and lost. I wore either purple and gold or green and white shorts, and the other kid had on white shorts with big red hearts. I didn't take it seriously when I saw him come into the ring. He caught me with a left hook and dropped me in the second round. I lost by a split decision, and I never uh, underestimated an opponent again. Butchie Attardo was my trainer after the Baby Gloves tournament, while Red Corrigan trained me, and James Stretch Walsh was in my corner during my boxing career. As an amateur, I won a lot of tournaments, including the Golden Gloves at 17 as a 139-pound lightweight. Like my brothers, I boxed in tournaments all over New England. The only time I remember the 3 of us fighting in the same ring was in the McDonough gym for the Golden Gloves in Southie when I was 10. The night that night we all won in our weight divisions. Other times, Billy and I also won numerous outstanding boxing awards, which were awarded after winning multiple fights in one night. Between my brothers and me, we must have won a couple of 100 trophies for boxing, basketball, baseball, and swimming, all of which served as dust collectors on Pilsudski Way. They're all gone now. My father went to a few of my bouts, but my mother never did. She didn't like fighting. I got a little money for my fights, but the most was $200 for an amateur fight. There was so much I liked about boxing, working out and getting in shape, matching my skill against someone else's, going to the gym, breaking a sweat, and just plain getting out of the house. I was nervous before every fight, but with butterflies in my stomach. But the second I got in the ring, it was just me and my opponent. I never saw or heard the crowd and just focused on the fight. Most of the time, we didn't talk about the matches. You were friends with some of the fighters, so you fought and then shook hands. You might fight the same guy 2 or 3 times. I never had my nose broken, but I did end up with 2 or 3 black eyes. My hands and thumbs were broken a few times, and my fingers never healed correctly. When I was 17, a couple of people wanted me to turn pro. I met Emil Griffith, the one-time middleweight champion of the world, who had come to town to fight Joe DiNucci, who later became Massachusetts Secretary of State. I was at Connolly's gym at the time training to fight when Griffith's trainer Gil Clancy had Kevin Dorian, Bo James, and me sparring with Griffith for a week. After the week, Gil Clancy wanted to take me to New York to train and turn pro, but my father wouldn't let me go. I was a junior at South Boston High and wasn't really disappointed. The 3 of us also sparred with Kevin Buchanan 3 rounds a day for a week. When he was getting ready to fight Roberto Duran, the lightweight champion of the world, I stopped fighting for a few years, but in 1982, at the age of 26, I got back in shape and started to fight again. Then I was getting $250 just to show up, but at the end, I couldn't get any fights. People didn't want to fight me. I was 167 pounds, but was trying to get back to 156. Johnny Pretzi, who had fought Rocky Marciano, and Tommy McNeil, who had fought Floyd Patterson for the week for the heavyweight championship of the world, were training and managing me then. Even though I was a super middleweight, I took fights against heavyweights, giving those guys 50 extra pounds against me just to get a fight. I ended up getting 3 Friday night fights at IBW Electricians Hall in Dorchester and won all 3. Then I stopped fighting and went on to other things. But back when I was in school, or still in school, boxing was sometimes even connected to my schoolwork. My favorite teacher was Vincent Borelli, who taught 7th grade math. My favorite teacher was seventh grade math. He was from the North End and came from a family of boxers. A bunch of us would stay after class to fight with him. I was 13, he was 24 at the same time, a good sized guy. He didn't try to hurt us, and we all had fun fighting him. He also ran a boxing program 3 days a week, 3 times a week, which I joined. He finished his career as vice principal at Grover Cleveland Middle School in Dorchester, and today we are still friends. I went to Boston College High for the 9th grade, but left at the end of that year to go to South Boston High, where I graduated on June 12th, 1974. It was a great place to go to school until busing entered the picture in September of 1974. South Boston High was all white. Billy and Johnny both attended Boston Latin High and English High before getting full academic scholarships to Harvard. Johnny actually got a perfect 800 on his math SAT score. Maybe things would have been different for me if I had followed in their footsteps and stayed at Boston College High. Not that staying there was my choice. With less than 2 weeks in my freshman year there, I ran into a little problem. After parents' night at the school, McDevitt, a kid from Dorchester, said, "Hey, I saw your mother, peg leg," referring to the fact that my mother had a brace on her leg. I cracked him and he went down. When I jumped on top of him, the seminarian who taught their class turned the ring on his finger around and cuffed me on the back of the head with the ring. I couldn't see who had hit me, but figured it was another kid. I swung around and punched the teacher in the face. He went down against a desk, and the next thing I knew, it had become a big thing. The faculty had a meeting to consider the fact that I had hit a seminarian. Interesting name they call him, eh? Mr. Swain, my guidance teacher, came to my aid. The kid, the kid is from South Boston, he said. He turned around to protect himself, but I had to leave school for the last week and never went back. My parents told me I was thrown out. 25 years later, when my older son, Kevin Barry, got accepted into BC High, I went over to tell my mother the news. Oh, could have graduated. Oh, you could have graduated from there, she told me. Ma, I got thrown out. Oh, that's not exactly right, she said. We never told you the truth. We decided you should go to Southie and save the $800 tuition. Maybe that $800 was the crossroads or turning point in my life, or maybe nothing would have been any different. But Kevin Barry graduated from BC High 4 years after I told him or told my mother about his acceptance. And I had no trouble paying the $6,500 a year tuition, and he turned out great. When I was in high school, I never pushed myself and coasted by casually or easily with B's. Some of my friends went off to college and became professors, like lawyers, while others went into construction or became policeman, man or fireman. By the time, by the time I was in high school, my brothers, uh, long gone from the house, they lived at Harvard while they were students there. When Billy had gotten an apartment to Annapolis, my father had wanted him to go there, but Billy decided to go to Harvard instead. My father was so mad he didn't speak to Billy for a year. In '72, during the Vietnam War, Johnny's student deferment ended at the end of his freshman year at Harvard. He got drafted and spent 2 years as a military police guarding a nuclear facility in Sandy Hook, New Jersey, which has since closed. After that, he went back and graduated from Harvard. On June 10th, 1974, just before my graduation from South Boston High, I met a beautiful dark-haired girl named Pam Cavallari, who was a junior in high school. That day, she was standing across the street from the I Street bathhouse with her friends when I walked by with a friend of mine who was dating her girlfriend. Right away, I noticed Pam's long dark hair, which fell below her waist, and her beautiful brown eyes, great smile, and terrific laugh. She was about 5'6" and had an unbelievable figure. I started talking to her and invited her to the graduation party that my friends and I were having on June 12th at the three-decker house 4 of us guys were living in for the summer. She came, as did about 300 other kids, and it wasn't long before Pam and I were boyfriend and girlfriend. We married 6 years later. She was and still is the love of my life. After I graduated from South Boston High, I got a couple of jobs. During the summer, I drove a daycare bus. I always liked kids and enjoyed driving them to the D Street day camp and from the park to the beach. I was out of the house then, living in the apartment in Southie with my friends. I started working at South Boston High School as a security aide in September. I should let the dog in there. Oh, he's not in, or she's not in there. September, which coincided with the start of busing. I liked the job, being with my friends and in the place where I had always been comfortable. But thanks to Judge Arthur Garrity, whose legal decision ordered 17,000 Boston school children to be bused to integrate the Boston schools, South Boston became a far different place from the one I had just graduated from. Because the quality of education in the black schools in Boston was deemed inferior to what the white kids received in their schools, the decision was made to integrate the schools. Rather, rather than simply take whatever steps were necessary to improve the black schools with better quality teachers and enhanced classrooms, students from the South Boston and black students from the other parts of Boston would now ride buses to the other side of the city to attend elementary, uh, junior high and high school at least 45 minutes away from their neighborhood schools. Judge Garrity, who lived out in Wellesley, a wealthy suburb of Boston, came up with this program. But the program didn't integrate anything. Instead, the city became a battlefield. Busing tore Boston apart, pitting parents against administrators and students against students. The media loved to portray the situation as racial. Whites from southern Boston against blacks from the rest of the city. But it wasn't that way at all. It was also it was about ripping kids out of their neighborhoods and sending them halfway across the city when their schools were only 2 blocks away from their houses. But Judge Garrity knew what was best for South Boston from his Wellesley home. All the women of Southie, especially Boston City Council member Louise Day Hicks, stood their ground, forming an anti-busing group called ROAR, Restore Our Alienated Rights. Every politician in Southie was against busing. The saddest part is that there is a generation of Boston kids walking around today who basically have no high school education, who were condemned to not even mediocre jobs because of one man's decision. These kids couldn't get a decent job, decent education because Arthur Garrity took that opportunity away from them. A grand experiment at the expense of the children of Boston ultimately failed. But not before blood was shed at the South Boston High. We now had black students in the school who were often 21 or 22, 22 years or 20 older than typical 18-year-old South Boston seniors. You could feel the hatred in the corridors. Just a year earlier, there had been a great atmosphere in those classrooms, those same classrooms, where learning was taking place. Students looked forward to going to school, to their classes, to sports, to just being around one another. But 1 year later, it was like Beirut. You were just waiting for the next fight to erupt. Kids from the South Boston weren't running scared though. South Boston High was their home, and no one was going to come in and take their homes from them. It was horrible for the black kids, but just as horrible for the poor white kids too. Both groups of kids had to walk the corridors, which were now lined with the tactical patrol force in full riot gear. These guys were a goon squads, seeming like more like vicious rejects from the Boston police force. They acted unprofessionally, attacking both blacks and whites, whacking everyone with their fists and their clubs. They seemed to forget that their kids were still, these kids were still minors, and added to the chaos, antagonizing all the students and the teachers rather than making anybody feel safe. A year later, when the TPF was disbanded, the state police came in and were more professional. They would break up the fights and separate everybody. Some fights would start in the cafeteria where the kids all sat in their own groups. They would begin as food fights, and the next thing you knew, there were fist fights everywhere, despite the high concentration of the police there. Most fist fights, however, began on the second floor at a crisscrossing point outside the auditorium. One fight involved Mikey Faith, a good friend of mine, in December of '74. He was walking out the door of the school library when a black kid used a buck knife with a black handle to stab him in the stomach. They must have had words before, or else the black kid had the wrong person. But while Mikey held his stomach and went down outside the library, His assailant ran toward the stairway between the second and third floors. I heard the screaming and came running up. When I saw the kid with the knife running, I ran after him. A cop and I grabbed him at the same time, and I sucker punched the kid. Mikey recovered, but he was in the hospital for a week or so. His attacker got probation or some bullshit thing. That afternoon, things got pretty rough. A mob of angry parents formed outside so the black kids couldn't leave the building and go to their buses. It was more of a safety issue and a fear of retaliation that made the police keep the black students inside the building until the mob dissolved. During the melee, a bunch of kids overturned a police car. In the newspaper the next day, there was a picture of the overturned police car with me standing next to it. That was typical of the media to grab a picture of the Southie kids wreaking havoc. As bad as things really were, the Globe and the Boston Herald American in '73 record American Herald Traveler became known as the Boston Herald American in 1982. The name was changed to the Boston Herald. We're portraying it as black and white a black and white issue, but that was not the way it was at all. All the people in South Boston wanted for their kids was to go to their neighborhood schools. Another fight I got involved in began when a bunch of black girls went into the girls' lavatory on the second floor and held the door shut. Then they jumped the two white girls who were actually or were already in there. One of those two girls was my Pam. When Ricky Calvin, a friend of mine who grew up in the Mary Ellen McCormick projects and was working as an aide with me, and I heard the yelling, we came charging into the bathroom and found a fight going on. When I went to break it up, this black girl named Gracie Richards, a little stocky thing, scratched my face bad. I gave her a right hand and knocked her out. Pam and the other white girl, Ronnie Barrett, were okay. The scratches on my face were pretty deep from where Gracie's fingernails had gone in, and I needed a tetanus shot. We carried Gracie down to the nurse's office where she came to. Another fight took place outside the office of the principal, Dr. Reed. I jumped in to break it up and ended up wrestling with a black kid who was swinging and punching. Holy, this is long. Swinging and punching. When Dr. Reed opened up the door to try and get the kid into his office, I ended up throwing the kid through the window next to the door. The window smashed, sending glass everywhere. The kid wasn't badly hurt, and all I was doing was defending myself. One black kid whose name was actually Siegfried Goldstein would walk around with a communist flag on his jacket, older and bigger than the rest of the kids, around 6'3" and 265 pounds. He was always picking fights, unlike most of the kids who had no other place to go and who were trying to get an education, which was nearly impossible in that atmosphere. This kid wasn't there for education. Finally, one day, Billy Allen, whose family was friends with mine, decided he'd had enough of Siegfried beating up on the smaller white kids. A fairly quiet, strong kid who never bothered anyone. Billy was pretty big himself, about 6'5" and 280 pounds. Billy came up to me on the second floor and where I happened to be stationed and told me, I'm going to get Siegfried when he comes out to his locker. Fuck yeah. Do whatever you have to do, I told him. That afternoon, when Siegfried went to his locker, Billy was waiting for him. He walked up to him and asked, "Why don't you pick on me?" Goldstein looked at him and said, "You ain't shit." At that, Billy Allen knocked him out. When a few of the black students tried to jump on Billy, I jumped on them and a big brawl broke out. When it had been broken up and everything had been cleared, the author, the author, the authorities asked me what happened. Siegfried suckered Billy, I told them, in a fight, and they put Siegfried into a holding room where you went when you got into a fight. Nothing happened to Billy, but Siegfried got real quiet after that and stayed away from Billy and the smaller kids. A few years later, I heard that he got pinched for murder. Didn't surprise me. One day, a lady from the neighborhood came to me and told me that a black aide who was working there was giving her son a hard time. When she asked me to take care of the problem, I said, sure. The side was, or the aide was stationed in the stairwell in the back of the auditorium, the spot where a lot of fights took place. Since I knew what time he went to lunch, one day I walked down the back of the auditorium as he was coming up the stairs and told him to leave the kid alone and quit bothering him. Fuck you, he told me. You're bothering all the black kids. With that, I suckered him and he fell down the stairs. When he went down, I started banging him. Then I turned around and walked up the stairs and out. The aide, who ended up with a cut over his eye and all lumped up, went to the office and reported me. No one saw the incident, so I had my friends who were also working there as aides say I was with them, and nothing ever came of it. The aide was a good-sized guy, 8 or 9 years older than me, but I was boxing at the time and in great shape. After that day, he was scared of me and wanted no problem with me or any of the kids. That first year, lots of teachers transferred. Joe Foley was a phys ed teacher who I knew from the boys club. He used to call me the Avenger because I always got everybody back who needed or who did anything to me. But he was a great guy and a terrific teacher. He ended up getting transferred during busing, which was a real shame because he loved South Boston High and South Boston. Some other teachers left because they wanted to. Yeah, some other teachers left because they wanted to. Some because they spoke out. The mess finally ended more than 20 years later when busing was declared a failure. But even then, Judge Garrity would not admit it. The day he died was one of the best days in South Boston history. Even today, I got upset when even today, I get upset when I think of what one person did to a community such as South Boston. The judge's grand experiment failed, and who was left to pay the price? You could not understand what it was like unless you lived there and saw a proud town condemned by busing. If I have strong feelings on certain issues, I have a right to. I was there and lived through those times. I have seen the results of forced busing, and more recently, forced housing. where did they want to where did they want to start these programs? With the poor people, of course, forcing the poor people to move out and let the minorities move in. The neighborhood went downhill and nobody got along anymore. The people of South Boston had the will of others forced upon them because of the actions of others. They were the ones who had to leave their schools and their houses. A true South Bostonian is someone whose family has been there for 2, 3, or 4 generations. Anyone else is an interloper. Today, sadly, South Boston is just a shell of its former self. And that is all a result of busing, the grand experiment that destroyed a once grand community. Things were rough all over Southie during those years. In '74, a cop got beat up at the Rabbit Inn in South Boston, and the TPF determined that patrons in the inn had done it. TPF went into the bar in full riot gear with their badges covered and proceeded to use their sap gloves to wail on everyone there. When they started to wail on Eddie Crow, a regular at the Rabbit Inn who had braces on both legs, Flaherty, another regular at the bar, dove on top of Eddie to protect him and ended up getting wailed on mercilessly. That was what was going on in South Boston, not just in the schools, but in the bars and on the streets. Hey, thanks a lot, Faye. Merry Christmas to you too. I think you guys got better weather than us down there. I got a ton of snow. Even though there was never a day at the high school without at least one fight, it wasn't a tough job for me. I could handle the fights and liked being around my friends. And besides, I could watch out for Pam. After the incident with Mikey Faith, they put metal detectors at the front door, but the black kids would take 1 or 2 teeth out of the Afro picks, put the picks between their fingers, and use them to punch kids. Unlike the black kids, the white kids weren't using weapons. They just used their hands. They would walk up to the black kid and crack him and start fighting. But the black kids were scared for their lives and doing what they could to protect themselves. It was a tough year for all the kids. You had the white kids who were mad because no education was going on and their school and college plans were being destroyed. Yeah, you have it. So do we. We have a big storm. I'm gonna head over to the clubhouse there Friday night for turkey dinner. My bro's cooking me, so we're gonna have a big party over there. Maybe I'll go live from there if I can. Anyways, I'll make a video at least and put it up. I edited one. And, anyways, I'm gonna carry on with this and get this chapter read. Try to keep it to just around an hour. Yeah, if you want, give us a thumbs up too. That'd be appreciated. So, like I say, it's not exactly easy reading online. It takes a little bit of guts because I know I'm going to become a great reader out of this, but that's fine. I'm going to continue on. Attendance was way down every day. Kids were boycotting the teams, so all sports were canceled for the year. The parents who could afford it sent their kids to private schools. That's what I would do. While some kids just quit and hung out doing nothing during the day, even though the senior year was ruined for most kids. Somehow they did manage to have a graduation. No more than 12 black kids came to graduation, but when one black kid went up to get his diploma, a white kid took off his mortarboard cap and whipped it at his head like a frisbee. During this, you gotta say too, it can't have been easy for the black kids either. Like being taken out of their community and put in a white community. Man, it must have been hard for everybody. It's so stupid. During that year, my brother Johnny kept speaking to John Marcon, the dean of admissions at Harvard, about my attending Harvard. I guess the folks at Harvard thought it would be special if three brothers from the projects went there, so the dean arranged it so I would spend a year at prep school. If my grades were good enough, um, I'd get a full scholarship at Harvard in September of '76. I got a scholarship to the Commonwealth School and academically demanding private school for grades 9 to 12 in Boston, and left my job at the South Boston High to start at the prep school in September of '75. I moved out of my apartment with my friends and back to Pilsudski Way. But things didn't work out so great for me at the co-ed prep school. First of all, I was 19 then, and the kids in my class were 16 or 17. I had been there since the ninth grade. Nearly all of them were from the suburbs, and even though it wasn't a religious school, most of the kids were Jewish. They even had this mandatory retreat for Yom Kippur. They were smart, nice kids, but I was an Irish kid from Southie, and all I wanted was to be with my girlfriend. It was culture. It was a culture shock to be with these kids. I was a complete outsider and felt lost there. The school was in a Victorian house with small classrooms, no more than 12 to 15 kids in the class. I liked the classes, but I didn't fit in at all. Things came to a head for me in the dining room. Each kid was supposed to set the table and serve the food for a week. I had no desire uh, to dish out anybody's food, and I never liked anyone telling me what to do. Hey, you're big boys, I told a couple of kids who put their plates in front of me. Here's a spoon, help yourself. When one kid said, you have to serve me, I did. I threw a plate of food in his face. I finished this week out and never went back. I had lasted 2 months there, but I felt great, no regrets. Johnny was a little upset and felt like I had thrown away my chance to go to Harvard, but my parents were okay with it. Besides, they were older and more tired by then. As I had gotten older, they had less and less control over me. My father had his first heart attack in 1974 and wasn't doing great. My mother's arthritis was as bad as ever, and she was even more exhausted than he was. I have no idea why I was the only one in the family to become a criminal. No one else in my family rebelled against my father, and all my sisters and brothers became hardworking, law-abiding professionals. Today, all of us are close. My brothers would do anything for me short of killing someone. The only difference is that, if necessary, I would take it one step further. Yet, in some strange way, my father lived through me and the life I chose. Here, here he had these two great sons, both of them whom graduated from Harvard and went on to lead successful, respectable lives. And he was the most proud of the son who became a criminal. It's hard to understand and sad. Yeah, Lancaster. Oh yeah, Alberta. Nice. I wouldn't want to be there either. On Monday to have a meal with my youngest son. That's wonderful to see your family. How wonderful. What a good mom. I'm sure they'll be happy to have your mom there. Your old house. Wow. Cool. I like Lancaster. That's where the bomber is, right? Oh, Lancaster, Ontario. Oh, I was thinking of, God, what's that in Alberta there where the Lancaster bomber is? Oh, well. Okay, so that's not that bad for you to travel there, eh? I'm not going anywhere. I'm just staying here with my dogs. I'll probably be doing book reading that day. Why not, man? Okay, I'm going to carry on, and I'm almost done this chapter, and that'll be it for the night. I'm just going to do a little over an hour tonight, I guess. So back in the fall of 75, $50 for a taxi. Oh, okay, that's not bad. That's pretty good. Then you could probably have a drink or two. Not that you drink, I don't think. I know you like to maybe do some edibles or weed or I don't know. I anyway. But back in the fall of 75, I was eager to get my job back at South Boston High and help out my parents. I had been working at the high school for just a few months when I ran into a problem. A new principal, Jerome Winigar, had been brought in from Minnesota to replace Dr. Reed, who was forced out. Winigar seemed to think he was intellectually superior to everybody around him. He had thin hair and a pockmarked face and looked like a tall version of the comedian Professor Irwin Corey. I only wish I could have used the cord attached to the glasses that hung around his neck to strangle him. It was something that they brought in a guy from Minnesota to show the city of Boston how to achieve integration in a high school. Winigar came for the money, not because he believed in the concept. Every time I saw him involved in a situation, he was cowling the black students for or favoring the minority teachers. He was there for 6 or 7 years for and the problems uh, from busing certainly didn't get any better under his leadership. One day, a few months after I had returned to my job at the high school, a group of us aides, including Richie Turpin and my best friend Billy Connell, were on the second floor of the auditorium uh, taking a break. A black kid walked by and said something smart to Richie, who said something smart right back to him. The kid went home and told his father, and a couple of days later, we had this big meeting at the school. Winigar set up this long table for the major from the state police who was in charge of the troops at the school. The vice principal, the black student, and his father, and Richie, Billy, and me. Richie, Billy, and I were sitting on one side, and the black kid, his father, Winigar, and the police major were on the other side. We were all going back and forth over who said what to who. The father, who was wearing a black t-shirt covered with the words Sugar Shack in glittering letters, turned around and said to his son, I don't care about who said what. Just show me the boy who hit you. None of us had hit him, but the kid pointed at me, of all people, and said, It was him, Daddy. It was Weeks. I'd never had a word with the kid, but the father jumped up like he was coming over the table at me. I jumped up out of my seat and suckered him over the table. When Billy and Richie jumped over the table, the state police major jumped in and broke it up. Jerome Winigar backed the kid's story, and it looked like I was going to be brought up on charges. The state police major wrote up his report, gave it to Jerome Winigar, and told him, "You should read it." Winigar said, "I think we all saw the same thing." But he read the report and was dumbfounded. The state police major told me he had written that the black kid was coming after me and I was defending myself. Winigar insisted that he saw it the other way. The state police major said, "I've been a trooper for over 25 years. In my experience, he was defending himself." A week later, Jerome fired me, not Richie or Billy, and I got brought up on charges of assault and battery. That was the first time as a defendant, but the case got thrown out at a probable cause hearing in Southie. At that hearing, I met Billy O'Connell, one of the owners of Triple O's, a popular bar in Southie, who had been brought up on charges of beating up a black cab driver. It was Billy who offered me a job bouncing at a Triple O's and the chance to get to know James Whitey Bulger. See, it's funny because Triple O's here is a white spot, man. Yeah, for a real white spot. I'll carry on. We're almost finished this chapter, and that'll be it. That'll be it for tonight. We can open it up for discussion if anybody's left. I had no idea that then exactly what I was getting involved in, but I believed then, as I do now, that every time something negative happens in my life, something good will occur. It was time to begin a new chapter in my life. I never look back on anything that has happened to me and dwell on it. Not then, not now. It happened. It's over. I have no regrets about any parts of my life except for two mistakes: losing Pam and not being a better father to my two sons. I have a regret. Very similar to that, losing my wife and not seeing my son and my daughter. It's a horror. I regret. But what do I regret? How can I make them, you know? Anyways, last bit here. But in the winter of 76, as I left South Boston High for the last time and traveled 1 mile to the doors of Triple O's, I wasn't entering a completely unfamiliar world. In the summer of 74, I'd been bouncing at Flicks, a nightclub in the Somerset Hotel on Commonwealth Avenue in Boston. The club handled a rough crowd, and the owner had asked if 8 of us would come in and clean up the place, which we did. There were lots of fights, and my friends and I were busy every night taking care of them. One night after the bar had closed, someone rode by on the expressway and shot out the club's windows. I have no idea if they were involved in the shooting, but a half hour later, Jimmy came walking in with Steve Flemmy. It was the first time I'd ever seen Stevie, although I certainly knew he was a member of the Winter Hills mob and had been involved in the gang wars in the 1960s and 70s. My friend gave the two of them a hard time at the door and told them the club was closed when the owner recognized Jimmy and Stevie and immediately let them in. But that was not the first time I'd seen Jimmy. 6 years earlier, when I was 13 and sitting next to my brother Billy, who was driving my father's car down Burke Street in the old colony projects, I'd seen Jimmy walk out of the back of a building. It was summertime, and he was by himself, wearing a short-sleeved blue and white striped shirt. He looked like he was in great shape. Stop staring at him, Billy had told me. He's Whitey Bulger. I know who he is, he said. I said. I said. Yeah, reading words that you don't see. Okay, so that's it, man. That's chapter 1. Wow, cool. That was a bit of reading, eh? Over an hour and 5 minutes. It wasn't easy, I'll tell you that, folks. If there's anybody, I see one person still watching. 3 likes, thanks a lot. I know, doesn't matter to me because it's just going to go on and it'll be on live. Not that if anybody wants to read it, but good to be here. Mafia Truth, that's Loomis, man. Hey, Lewis, how you doing? I wish I could bring you on. I don't know how to do that, though. Fuck, that'd be wicked to have you on right now, Loomis. Fuck, man, you inspired me, man, to do all this shit again. You know, like I usually do videos that are like, well, you see my videos, they're usually like edited, like motorcycles or my dogs, always, of course, or just my life in general. You know, I've done videos like of us tearing down, like construction jobs we've done, and lots of work on our clubhouse and other clubhouses, and I don't know. Anyway, so this thing isn't easy, man, and I like the mob genre, of course, like a lot of people do, and I didn't want to like go into the mob genre and be stupid at it or have no creds. You gotta learn StreamYard, yeah, I guess so. But at least I can. The creds is that this is the buddy's book there. I don't know if you saw earlier, Loomis, but this arrived today. That's Joe Bonanno's book. I'm going to be doing a reading of that one too once I get through this. And I also mentioned, I think you can add people to your live with Skype. Yeah, I don't know. I've never tried it. So anyways, and the other one was this book called Killer by Joey. I don't know if you've heard of that one too. It's like a diary of a hitman, for God's sake. I've seen the interviews online before. I'm going to check my fire here. I thought I'd kind of make my atmosphere here too, like a little bit more homey. You know, like a little friendlier giant kind of feel to it, you know? Oh, God, that's beautiful, man. I tell you, I've had this thing going for days. Super hot. Beautiful. There we go. There you go. Gorgeous. Yeah. There's one of my dogs. Yes. Yeah. I should look and see here. I'm sure there's things like pop out dashboard, send. No, that's not it. Manage. I don't have access to that feature. You don't have access to that feature either. I don't know, man. I'd love to do that. I'd have you on right now, Loomis, like big time, man. Because I know we were shooting the shit a little there today. And I don't know. I've done, I like, what I was saying earlier too was that, you know, the last couple of videos I did were pretty epic to me. So like the Remembrance Day one, Remembrance Day 2022. Again, a lot of these videos that I make are just stuff that people send me, eh? Like, you know, how can I do it if I'm in it? So, well, if you, no worries, I'll show you how tomorrow. Yeah, okay, cool. Whatever, bro. I'm going to be, tomorrow I'm heading over to the clubhouse, so I probably, maybe I'll read earlier because 29, yeah, I'm on to page 29 tomorrow. That's a long chapter, eh? Holy. I always have this thing too. I want to be a better reader. And I always have this thing like I feel like I want to get done always when I'm reading. But I'm just going to keep pecking away at this. And it's a goal to get a book read always. It feels like an achievement. You're that much smarter for it, that's for sure. I know it's a little bit later for people out east, maybe 2 3 hours later. That's okay. I'd love to be on. You said about if I wanted to be on your show. I thought a cool show that me and Loomis could do is about addiction and how to cope with it, how to get sober. Yeah, I got a guy calling me now. Christ, I'm on a live stream, man. Get out. No. So, bloody hell. Maybe that's my cue, eh? Good Lord. These bloody people. There we go. Anyway, I was going to say a cool show or a show that we could do that could be just like an hour-long conversation is about addiction, ways to cope with it, and something, man, something that Loomis said to me today. Like, I went to rehab for like 62 days on the Sunshine Coast there, eh? So, um, how I deal with it, like I said to him, was like, to me, like, what gets me through is the weed, and it's like prescribed to me. And coffee, I like black coffee, eh? Like, people will go, oh, coffee. And it's like, no, I'm not like fucking pounding coffee that's like full of 3 sugars or 4 sugars and shitloads of sweet cream and all this crap. Not at all. Black coffee that I make, or black coffee always. So, and the weed is prescribed. It's like I say again, I could speak to legalization of weed in Canada too, which would be super interesting probably for Americans. And because it's like night and fucking day here. Like, weed is legal, eh? So it's like weed is like as common as a fucking pencil on the table now. It's like edibles. And I thought it'd be interesting even just to speak of to the packaging. And it's multifaceted now, like in Canada. So I'm also, you're legal, yeah, but we also have recreational though. Like, we have the weed store, like just like a liquor store. Go ahead and buy weed, whatever the fuck you want. Like I like these beers too. We have these infused beers that, like, it's not. I don't drink alcohol, but it's like a raspberry kind of like beer kind of drink, but zero alcohol. And it's like, those are nice. You get a little buzz off them. You can get them in 2.5, 5 milligrams, and 10. Yeah. So that'd be, it's night and day, like I say, in Canada compared to the US. And I'm on Washington State's border. So, yep, roger that. See you later. I'm still here. So that's great. I'll Yeah, I like watching your show, man. Your show's excellent. I love all the stuff you do. It's cool. And I know, like you said there, like you didn't like doing lives, but your lives are my favorite, man. I love to go on there and listen to you. I like Bill Stocks too. I like to listen to him. I know he like probably diss you or whatever, diss me, disses a lot of people, or he gets dissed a lot. But I like his show. Always been a big fan since day one. Anyways, so I babbled on for over an hour and 14 minutes. Tonight I read the second half of the chapter of Kevin Weeks's book, Brutal, the untold story of his life inside Whitey Bulger's Irish Mafia. Yeah, so if you were here, I appreciated you checking it out. And hope you learned something. I sure am. I already read all this part about it, so like I'm already read that part. I look forward to getting to the parts I haven't read. So anyways, I'm gonna starts 9 p.m. Eastern. Who's Stocks? Bill Stocks, chatting with Stocks. I'll be on there then, 9 o'clock. That's like coming up at 6 for me, I guess. I'll definitely be on there, man. Bill Stocks, you know who he is, chatting with Stocks. He's like a lot of people that I know, they go on and on and on fucking about Gene Borello and all these guys and like do videos about them and that Lee Cole guy too. And like, fuck, man, it's like so fucking negative, eh? Like it's brutal. Like, I don't know. I thought like Bill was a Christian too. Like, yeah, and like I like to rock the Italian look, with my cross and whatnot. But I saw that interview you did with Anthony Aralata. I thought that was so cool, with his big cigar and his bald head. And he looks fucking good, man. Like he's been pumping the weights. And yeah. Okay, so anyways, I'm going to sum up. And I thank everybody for joining me. I'll see you next time I read a chapter. I'm out.